and welcome to another MrBetaByte video. Today we're going to be looking at another F30. Not really looked at this before this video, so we're going into this together for the first view. I've not even powered it on, to be honest, although I believe it does power on fine. But the thing with it, the case is just really very, very rusty. I mean, it's just terrible. So, without further ado, let's get the top off. So there it is. Actually, this looks really good. Really very tidy, which is a good start. It's always encouraging. So the first thing I'm going to do, well, the first thing I notice is it's halfway through a lace, which is a bit concerning. You wonder why that is. That seems to be alright. It's just a bit odd that it's lacing or part way through a lace when the front loading system's up. I can see a problem immediately. Yeah, there's some grease in here of some description. I don't know what that is. It's almost like Vaseline. Ooh. I don't think it's supposed to do that. It seems to be a rice. Yeah, that's a bit interesting. You see the, well, I don't know whether you can see it, the end sensor, sort of electromagnet type thing, just moving around there to the metal, so it signals to the deck it's all good to go. Yeah, so let's turn it over, have a look. And what I quite like about these is you don't have to take the screws right out. Usually. Sometimes you do. So if you undo these two, so first thing I'm going to do is remove the little bit of glue that's on the Hall effect. This machine's obviously been in the damp, so a bit of plastic's fallen out. Don't know quite where that's from. So yeah, if there is a problem with moisture being in that glue, it's not going to be long before it wrecks the Hall effect. So I'm going to do that next. So yeah, that's cleaning up nicely, and just using tweezers just to get some more of the glue off. The brush doesn't seem to get at. I think this glue is a little bit better than the glue they used on the earlier machines. Maybe they were starting to realise this was a bit of an issue. That's actually not looking too bad. See, there's a bit of glue. Oh yeah, it's a big blob of glue. So I'm trying to be as careful as I can because I don't want to damage stuff. I don't mind replacing it, but if I can save the original, I'd rather do that. Generally, they're pretty reliable. It's only really the glue that seems to just cause mayhem and make them fail. Right, so that's that. So, what I'm going to do is just wind this back up and just see what happens as it tries to load. Somehow that seems better already, I don't know. So it's going okay. Yeah, so that one guide has just totally missed its target. So let's see if there's anything left on the thread. So a bit difficult to show really, but on the guide here, and again if you see my other video on the loading ring, this screw here adjusts via a sort of sprung bit of metal how high this guide comes up, so it can properly locate in there, and very carefully but pushing down with a bit of force you can adjust them quite easily. Why that needed adjusting, I don't know. They very seldom cause problems, but if at some point the tape's got stuck in here, then, so it's locating fine now, then, and somebody tried to rip it out, that can sort of cause it just to go a little bit the worse for wear. Yeah, you see that's now going as it should, rather than coming around here. And that one's going as it should. There we go. Super. So, time to fire this up. Well, I gotta love it. Printed out a few bits and pieces, power supply, outputs, and the SS24 board. That's right, isn't it? 34. SS34 board as well, just to measure voltages. And then while I was working on it, suddenly all of the tape action, if you like, segments lit up. So I power cycled it, and it's now sort of trying to work. That seems to work. Channels don't. Oh no, it's not channels, is it? Where are the channels? There. So that works. How very odd. Bit of a funny one. My initial thought was that it's the power regulator chip, which is fairly unreliable generally on any machines that use them. But it's just odd that once it's warmed up a bit, it is now working. So my feeling is probably capacitors. Probably capacitors in the power supply, could be capacitors maybe. I don't think there are that many that actually would affect the logic. Because ultimately that power regulator, this is an SDR chip, is receiving a signal from the control chip, which then provides the voltages for the switched on state. So switched off, everything should work. Interesting. So, well, I suppose we better try tape while we can. It does seem to be wanting to play ball. Let's just see what happens. Yeah, the usual stumble these things make when they're loading. It's usually a bit of contamination. There's a little leaf switch at the back here, so that'll need a bit of a clean probably. The head spin, that's a good start, but you've got to turn it off and on again. If it goes into failure mode, you have to put it back to standby and then back on. Oh. Well, it's not happy, is it? Play. So we've got no reel. Which is interesting. And it doesn't want to do anything. And rewind. It immediately just stops. Yeah, it doesn't even bother, does it? I'm going to have to eject this tape, aren't I? You can probably guess why I'm not terribly enthralled about doing that, but hey ho, it's all part of it, isn't it? And part of the reason why I get through so many tapes. Oh, it's all there. Let's just check the voltages that are coming out of that that regulator chip. Let's put it on 40. so I want switched. Switched 9 volts, switched 12 volts. On the 102, pin 1. Yes, it is 12 volts there. And unswitched 5 volts. I know that's fine, because it wouldn't even be lighting up like it is. Switched 12 volts. Switched at 9 volts on the black connector, pin 5. Switched 9 volts, a little bit low, but not causing any concern there. And switch power on, ground, RF unit switched, 9 volts. So we're doing alright there. So what I want to actually see is on pin 4 on C104, which I believe is that one, I could be wrong. On pin 4, I want to see this go down when I turn it off. Is that the right one? Unswitched 6 volts. Now on pin 5, so if I'm on the right pin, 3 volts. So, okay, so we know it's not loading well, unloading properly. The spools aren't running either. So it does feel, yeah, there's something there. I've got to turn it off and back on again. Yeah, it's jamming solid. Interesting that it's doing that, because it free moves, but as soon as you dry, oh, now it's not. That seems to have jammed. So I'm just gently rotating the motor through the gap. I wonder if it is a bad idler. It seems incredibly... Gosh, that's gone stiff. So I'm just very carefully turning the idler, which of course directly turns the motor. And that feels alright. You can see it tries. It does try. Well, it did once. Just move that over. Yeah, it just sort of wobbles a little bit and tries to. Let's see what a jet looks like now. Didn't mean to do that. There we go. Yeah, I do wonder if that tape down switch is a little bit on the dodgy side. I think that's what it is. Okay, well, that wouldn't be such a terrible thing. So what I'm going to do at this stage, I'm not going to go at this too much past getting this off. And I'm just going to put a little bit of deoxit in there, and just flood this a little bit with deoxit. Having said that, I may well change my mind. Depends how bad it looks. If it looks really bad, then I'll just take it all apart and clean it. In fact, why don't I just do that? I think that's a very good idea. Oh, didn't undo that one. Does help if you take all the screws out before you try and remove it. So we're off and unplugged. Looks like the remains of a spider. Let's get that out. And okay, so let's take this apart. Now these actually do come apart fairly well. I always am a bit nervous about doing this because these things are getting very old and very fragile. And it is a bit difficult to do. Well, there's tweezers. I just wonder if I could cheat with some tweezers. Splay those bits open at the same time. Yeah. Nearly. I see, that is so good. But you can't do everything at once. Because you need to splay it out while pushing up. One day I will find a really cool way of doing this. I wonder if I can find a really cool way of doing this now. Oops. Oh dear. Gosh, I'm doing really well here. It's just that sort of thing that you wish you could just have an extra set of hands. And I don't mean somebody else, because there wouldn't be enough space. It's one of those jobs that's quite a confined space thing to do. So that's a switch apart, and that's literally how it works. It's just bottom set of contacts go in here, and then top set just go on there, and it just clips in. So they're really easy to clean, which is incredibly useful, especially as these machines get older. To just way too much on there. This stuff isn't cheap. Having said that, I still have a little bit of, I suppose shouldn't be using a Q-tip either. But anyway, it's the first thing that came to hand. Because obviously I'm going to risk covering stuff in fluff. But yeah, I'm still using my old Maplin cleaner, which I bought a number of years ago. But of course, I've only really started sort of playing with this, playing with machines again in the last sort of couple of years, so I suppose it isn't necessarily entirely a fair thing to say. It's lasted well because I haven't used it. Things tend to last quite well if you don't use them. Unless they go off. Yes. So, let's reassemble this. So there's a hole there, and both there, and both bits need to line up with that hole, and that hole is populated by that. So it's actually fairly difficult to do with all the cables on. Just try that again. Yeah, I'm doing this wrong, aren't I? Like so. So it's back together, almost. There we go. That has gone back together. You probably haven't seen any of that because my camera angle is not the best and my lighting is not the best tonight. But see, that's all fine. Let's give it a bit of a clean. Should we take this off? These are actually slightly better idlers because they have the side portion here, and that means they're less susceptible to actually bend up. Some of the earlier ones, like on the C20, 30, 40, didn't have this, and they'd start to bend up, and you could actually bend them back with a bit of heat, some care. But that's actually all okay. The motor is very free spinning. These capacitors look weird. Slightly. I think they're alright though. It's only the way they're packaged, isn't it? Plastic's not being shrunk on the same as some of the others. But overall, I mean, this portion of the deck looks great. I mean, it's in really good condition. Looks to be very well looked after. All plastics look fairly good. There's a crack there, but I'm not going to worry about that. Maybe I will worry about that. The thing is that even though that plastic doesn't do anything, if it breaks off, falls into, I don't know, spools or whatever, then it will be a problem. So let's just, a bit more than I wanted really. That's fine. It's fairly liberally sticking some glue on. Everything else looks fine. So that's great. Well, it's still terribly confused, isn't it? And I think that is that switch at the back. Now you can remove that switch at the back. So the leaf switch is in there. And as you can see, I mean, it's in a semi-loaded position at the moment, but it's not making any contact. So I don't know. I don't know quite why that potentially could be causing a problem, but I don't think it is. I think there are darker forces at work with this machine. So, but I'll give it a clean. We'll see how it goes, and investigate further. Okay, so I've just wound this on by hand so it's fully loaded, and you can see just how far it actually pushes that leaf switch closed. So I've worked in the deoxit, and all looks okay. So, yeah, interesting one. So I think we might be looking at logic problems still. Sort of weird goings on. So time to investigate that, I suppose. So a quick check around the voltages, and nothing is really making sense from this chip. I seem to be getting all sorts of random voltages and no voltages in certain places, you know, things like real drive. So I'm lucky enough to have another board. I will have to do some alignment. See, there's a few pots there for various things like servo speeds and whatever. So I'm going to change this. At least we'll know if it is just on this board, and I'm pretty confident it is. So yeah, let's get it swapped out. It's actually really easy. Well, I say really easy. It's relatively easy to get out. You're just taking out these two screws here, flipping this up, and then taking out not a huge amount of connectors. Being a Sony, each connection is unique, so the plug types are all unique. Makes it a lot easier. You don't have to label stuff up, and the RF in out will have to come off as well, which is easy enough. So let's crack on and get that sorted. So the boards are now swapped over, and what's interesting is how often Sony boards throughout the life of production of a machine change. And I will say this confused me. It's got AGC and 5 volts switched, I think it's got, no, unswitched, and then ground on these 3 pins. And I was scratching my head, have I missed something, and has it fallen through? So I dropped the bottom board, had a look, no, not missed anything. And then I had a look at the old board, and look at the new one, the replacement. There's that connector. On the old board, it's not even there. So that's reassuring. Also, this connector here is angled, and on the replacement board it isn't, so it's slightly different. Otherwise it was pretty straightforward. Once I'd obviously kept the cables from getting trapped underneath it. I haven't screwed this down yet, so which I will do before I power it on, just to be on the safe side. Don't want anything shorting out, although it'll probably be okay. So yeah, I'll get the screws put in and we'll power it on and see what happens. All put back together. I have not bothered with the RF in-out, don't need it for testing, so just left that. Not too worried about this floating about as well, because you can see by the legend there, it's not, you know, this metal isn't going anywhere really that it shouldn't much. So yeah, we should be alright with that. So let's power it on. Now it's doing that same thing where there's no clock. So that old board was fine. Interesting. I was really convinced changing that board was going to do the trick. So yeah. So knowing that, I think I am going to put the old board back in. We've eliminated it pretty much from our inquiries, and that strongly leads me to suspect it is actually a power supply issue, I would say, because it's not switching on that regulator, and obviously there's something not right. It's locking up or something, locking up the clock. So let's do some checks. Just change the capacitors on the power supply, and this is the power supply I'm working on. This one you can see is one from another machine, and you can actually see how burnt this is. Very high hours machine. The board is really quite scorched. This one is really, really good, really tidy. You can see there's been a little bit of scorching, but really very good. So main capacitors I change are these two, this one, so this one, and then on this side there are 2 down there which I might not be able to show you too easily. There we go. So those 2 there. So yeah, replacing those do actually make a huge amount of difference. You can see here it looks as if I've missed one, but there isn't actually one there. So yeah, really good. I've also replaced the fuses, because they do, at this age, they do have a habit of just fracturing randomly. So yeah, time to put this one back in the machine and see how we go. Okay, so I've done a bit of work on this now, and turns out there's a few faults with this machine. The first fault we were seeing, where the clock was locking up, that was down to mainly, I think, this capacitor here. It's a 470 microfarad 6.3 volt capacitor, and it was very leaky. It had spewed out its innards somewhat. I've actually recapped it, including this one here. Don't miss this one. This was a little bit leaky. There was another one behind here that was also a bit leaky. I didn't bother changing the 1 microfarad 50 volt capacitor. It physically looks okay, and having tried the machine, it's fine anyway. It's difficult to get to because it's actually behind the display, and the display is actually held on by a double-sided sticky pad, which is really strong. I just don't want to start putting that about, so I've left it. Should be fine. I have also recapped most of the power supply. I've done the common ones, the common capacitors that give issues, which are the small ones basically, small sized ones. So they're done. So now we've got the problems with the deck. Now I still feel that maybe the leaf switch at the back here isn't quite adjusted right, or it's causing problems, but I don't quite wholly believe that, because basically the logic just seems a little bit all over the place. We've tried the other board, that made no difference at all, so we can discount that board. Now I have sort of tested again the real motor in this, and it does try and energize. You can feel initially it does have a go, and it just gives up. So I've got another deck out of a scrap F30, and I'm just going to turn this on, turn the machine on, and you can see that motor is actually rotating, and it's trying to work, which is far more than the motor in there is trying to do. So that's basically on this connector here. This is the one to the motor, the real motor in the deck itself, and this I've just connected in, chopped off the little cable tie. But yeah, I mean, that's fine. Obviously it's not doing anything because nothing else is connected, the solenoids aren't connected, whatever. But that shows that there is a problem with the real motor in this deck. Now, my feeling is, given that I'm having all sorts of problems with the capacitors, I wonder if the actual capacitors on the motor are bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change those and just see what happens. I have measured voltages, and to be completely fair, I didn't see any change in voltages when I was selecting fast forward rewind, or it was in standby. So I don't know. But obviously, I mean, it's working because this motor is spinning. So I think I need to change those motor capacitors and see what happens. I mean, it could well be the chip's gone. I have had one before. It is rare. I have had a chip go bad, and but it just seems a bit odd that this machine has just so many problems. So we'll do that and see how we go. The capacitors on the motor are actually 16 volt, 47 microfarads, yeah, so the capacitors are 470 microfarads at 16 volt. I've got these 25 volt, but they're physically the right size, so I'm happy to use those. As long as the voltage is higher, I can't see any real issue with it, and they're high quality, so yeah, I'll get and do that. So between recording the last segment and now, I've done quite a lot of work on this machine. The Hall effect sensor actually did die, despite me cleaning it. Possibly didn't do the best job, but hey ho, that's life. So it's got a new Hall effect sensor, and the heads are fine. But we've still got problems, and it's taken me quite a while to really get to the bottom of what's going on. Mainly because I haven't been terribly well, but you know, sort of clarity of mind and all that. So yeah, I'll show you what's happening as the deck is. So that's on. So laser's fine. And it's doing something a bit bizarre. What is it doing? Have I unplugged something? Let's have a look. Don't mind that bit of plastic. Has it thrown a wobbly? Obviously it has. Well, that's something new again. Gosh, you're going to love this old kit. So, let's just pair it off. Now that's very interesting. It's actually doing something quite different. Okay, so cut long story short, basically what it was doing was it was lacing the tape fine. Everything was working okay, except when you hit rewind. When you hit rewind, it would just cut out straight away. So, basically, after a lot of fiddling about and trying to work out what was going on, I should have really have thought about the clue that it was cutting out in rewind straight away. It was just stopping dead. And what it actually turned out to be is the sensor. I don't know whether you can actually see it. Sensor down here. You can see the board it's mounted to. That hadn't gone open circuit. It was measuring about 25 ohms. It should be about 2.8 ohms. But that was causing all the problems with the lacing and not really working properly. So that sensor actually comes through here, and there we go. So that sensor's actually got worse. So if I now try rewind, it's picked up the fact that I turned it off. You can see now I've got an error state. So I can actually. Yeah, so I haven't got an error state. I was getting an error state before with the bad sensor. But obviously, rewind, you know, it just thinks it's at the beginning of the tape. So if I plug in this good sensor, which is from my scrap deck there, probably not a good idea to do it like that, but still. And turn it off, turn it on. So that's now working, and it possibly should error. because there's no spool movement. Maybe not. I'm still learning about this later type of deck and machine. But no, that's quite happily rewinding now. So that's fine. So if I now press eject, and it actually properly ejects, of course it won't go any further unless... So let's press eject again, get to the end. So it needs to find something magnetic against that sensor at the end of the unload. When it unloads, it moves the sensor. It's really very, very clever. It moves the sensor from detecting whether there's any foil with the tape to this metal section here at the end of the tape unlace, and that tells the processor, oh, unlaced, time to energize the solenoid, eject the tape. So that's really cool, actually. It's a very, very good idea, and a great way of removing the extra switch here, which does give problems. But on the sort of older C20, 30, 40, 80 decks machines. So yeah, really good idea. Just a little bit disconcerting. I just couldn't quite, not having a clear head. Still don't. You might be able to tell, but yeah, it's just not quite as straightforward with the newer deck. Now I do have an SL-200, and that is doing weird and wonderful things, really weird things. And you push the tape in, the deck goes to sort of do a check, and then it ejects it. And I do wonder if that's a similar sort of thing, that one of the sensors, and probably it is the rewind, if you like, the right hand sensor, is also faulty on that. But we'll see. I mean, I'm really interested to get that machine back out and have a look now. And I do think I've got footage on me checking that from like 2 years ago. Been set in a box. It's actually quite cool. If the deck is fully laced, obviously the switch is actuated, the leaf switch is actuated at the back here. You press eject and it gets so far, the leaf switch is deactivated, so it's open, and this is dodgy, and it ejects because it's sensing that it's reached the end of its travel, even though it hasn't. So that's actually quite cool. So if you ever get that problem, there'll be something with that sensor or the circuitry that's associated with it. So yeah, it's quite useful to know that, because it is bizarre. If you don't know these decks, which I don't that well, from that point of view anyway, it's a new one on me, and yeah, really cool to know. So the next thing is to actually get that sensor out. Now, it is a bit tricky. My guess is ultimately Sony would like you to take all of this off, which I might do actually. When I took the sensor off this deck, I did actually manage to do it without removing all of this assembly. But to be fair, it's probably going to be easier if I do just take it off in here, especially as I've got less room, because obviously that deck is out. So yeah, let's crack on. I'm going to try and do as much as I can on camera, but I may well end up having to do little bits off camera and then show you what I've done. So that's that. It's a belt off, and is that enough? You've got to get all the cables out from the back. So I'll do that. I'll do that now, and we'll carry on from there. It actually wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So this, with a little bit of gentle persuasion, it actually swings round and releases itself from the cables that are going through the cable management at the back. Then it's 3 screws. So these 3 screws, small screws, one here, and one there, and that frees the whole of the solenoid. Then all of this is just being held in by one clip, and it's one of these clips. Familiar with those from the pinch roller? Exactly the same clip. Just flick that off, and then that allows the whole assembly to come free. And you just move it out of the way, and then this. I don't think there's a clip on this. This, with a little bit of fiddling, which I might not be able to do without... Oh, first of all, I've got to get that spring off. Do this one-handed. That'd be really cool. So get the spring off, and then you can actually sort of manipulate this out of the way. Oh, maybe I do have to release this arm, so let's release this. It's actually a lot easier. This will not come up very far, but it's probably enough just to get this past, I'm hoping. Oh, it is a bit of a squeeze, isn't it? There we go. And out it comes. So, yeah, that's it. And so a bit of a battle there. Managed to get it out. It was caught quite badly around the sort of entangled around the plastic here. So plastic cable management bit. So that's looking good. So I managed to drop the spring down there by the looks. Yes, the spring's fallen off. So I'll put that back with its host, and let's try and get this marvellous little assembly back in. Marvellous. Just want to make sure that that spring is not going to get in the way. And can I do this one-handed? Probably not. Yeah, I'm going to do I'm going to do this two-handed because it's quite fiddly. Managed to get the spring on. It's actually quite soft metal, so you have to be really careful you don't overstretch it or play about with it too much. You can see I've slightly distorted it, but it'll be fine. But yeah, really surprised how soft and sort of malleable that metal is. So yeah, certainly something to be careful of. So what I'll do now, well, let's see how much I can do one-handed. I'm sort of struggling with tripods at the moment, insofar as it's getting one that will allow me to get the camera where I want it and not get in the way, and allow me to do everything I want to do. So this needs to go down here, and that goes back on top of the plastic assembly that is that little sensor. And that's it. That's all pretty much back together. I mean, obviously, I need to put the clip back on there, which I've now dropped. Well done. Oh dear. Oh, I think that's just slipped out of the way. Oh, there we go. It's on. Yeah, I think I've got those the wrong way around. These are two different sizes. So you can see that one is straining, the other one's really loose. So let's get those the right way round. So there's a top tip that we've all just learned together. I mean, you can see they're different. The actual diameters of these two are different. This one being much smaller, or I suppose much is a bit of a strange quantifier. So that's it. That's the way it should be. That's looking good. These are fairly forgiving, to be honest, and thankfully. So yeah, so I'll get these get 3 screws back in, and then I have the fun of trying to get the cable management back round here. So it's a little bit of a fiddle to do that, but yeah, just sort of catch it in the cable in the cable management as I sort of twist it in. And okay, so the 3 screws are back together, and a bit of a faff getting these back in here. What I actually ended up doing was removing the 2 screws here and just lifting the head amp PCB just slightly out the way, just so I could gently feed in the cables. So it's fine. And obviously put the 2 screws back in here. Got a screw to go in there actually. Well, I'm done with that. But yeah, where is that screw? Oh yeah, it's one of these small ones. So I need to put that back in. And then I need to feed through the wire back to the connector under here. And we should be able to give it a test. all back together and cabled in. Oh, let's lift this up. Cabled in the sensor as well, so it's plugged in, and sort of tidied up the cable management. It was a little bit messy and caught up and whatever, so that's all good. So I suppose the next thing is to try it. I did actually mess this up a little bit. The actual sensor itself needs to locate, there's a bit of plastic there, there's a little plastic lug. It needs to locate, and this bit of metal here is really difficult to see. This bit of metal actually is just floating about. It's not fixed to anything as such. And basically it is, can I find it? This here. You can see, possibly see, that this here pushes, or is pushed by the lacing assembly. When it unlaces, it pushes this assembly that runs under here, pushes under here, which you can't really see, very difficult to see, and pushes the sensor towards the metal of this assembly, so that tells it that it has actually unlaced. So we should be good to go. So powered on, let's give it a go. I have to push that down because there's no front flap on this. That's looking pretty good. And rewind is fine. Eject is the big one. Perfect. Well, hey, we have a working F30. So it was that sensor. It was causing so many problems. You can actually see the where it actually locates into that. It's a scrap deck. Is it there? Yeah. That's the little assembly that basically pushes the sensor assembly towards the metal when it unloads and tells the deck, oh, time to eject, time to change the solenoid state. So yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it is so cool how this works. Yeah, I've worked on quite a few of these now, but I've never had problems with loading, so I suppose it's something that I just wouldn't have really thought about before. I've been even through the manual, and never really dawned on me just how clever the unloading and the loading sequences are, and how they really cut down on the amount of physical switches are actually used. I do like Sony for that. They reduce the belt counts because belts are unreliable. C9 had just one belt, and then after that, no belts other than these nylon type belts, which are very, very reliable, although they do stretch, but hot water can shrink them. I might do that in another video. And yeah, and then they seem to start removing switches, which is really a good idea. The problem I have with that is they put a really rubbishy, just basic leaf switch at the back, but it works, and it's a really wide wipe as well, so it is self-cleaning all the time that it's unloading, loading, whatever. So yeah, I can't complain too much. I mean, these switches now as well, the cord protect and the tape-in switches, they do give problems, and they don't have the same wipe. When they're actuated, they're not sort of wiping the contacts the same as the loading switch. But yeah, I suppose you can't have everything. So it's basically got 3 leaf switches, and everything else is done via a sensor or the logic. So yeah, well done, Sony. Nice job. And I hope on your next model you'll do the same thing. Oh. Yeah. You can dream. All working. Really pleased. And picture seems good. Obviously got flicker going on, and I've still not fixed my TV. It's still black and white. Goes colour when it feels like it, and I noticed that when it's cold, I'm getting some lovely vertical lines as well. So I'm going to have to recap that by the sounds of it, and do an alignment. Might do it on another video, maybe. We'll see. Or I might just do it. But yeah, it's fine. Had a bit of a head clog, which isn't surprising because I did change the Hall effect and clean the upper drum, and more than likely caused issues. Lovely jubbly. Yeah, a bit of a pause there. That's from the leaf switch at the back there, just wiping itself clean and being intermittent. Yeah, still getting issues there with head clogs, but it does need a proper service now. Like I said, I've cleaned the upper drum, and well, I've cleaned the whole drum, and but not the heads yet. So I'm pretty happy with this. I have to do a bit of work with the pinch-roller, and I did have to change also, which I don't think I mentioned, I had to change the reel assembly. The reel motor was actually pretty much dead, and of course I had a spare one from the other deck, so I've just swapped them over. I did try changing the capacitors, and yeah, made a difference. One of them was really leaky, but I think it's just taken the chip, and you know, I've got a spare, so put that on, and it's fine. So yeah, I actually have a really good, relatively good F30 now, and it now needs lots of running in, putting back together, of course, and just generally checking through once it's had a run. And yeah, really pleased. So thank you very much for watching this video, and enjoy your comments. See you in another video.